I used to love Star Wars. I grew up in the early 2000s, and as such, I saw the prequel trilogy in theaters. The commercial for Attack of the Clones had me so hyped because of the way it showed off Yoda fighting for the first time, and Revenge of the Sith was one of my favorite films for a long time while I was in middle school. Since I've always been super into gaming and reading, I also played a lot of the video games such as The Force Unleashed, Demolition, and the original Battlefront duology, and I read the extended universe stuff, like Death Star by Michael Reeves and Steve Perry, the Thrawn trilogy by Timothy Zahn, and the new Jedi Order series with the Yuuzhan Vong. As a side note, the Yuuzhan Vong post-original trilogy extended universe lore is some great stuff and is definitely far, far better than all of the post-Galactic Civil War Disney has puked out in recent years. They literally saw an awesome expansion of Star Wars lore, cast it aside, and passed up some of the more climactic story moments I've ever experienced in Star Wars media, such as the time in Vector Prime when Chewbacca is crushed between a moon and a planet. My childhood love of Star Wars survived the end of childhood, making it all the way until the release of Episode 8, The Last Jedi, in 2017. The sequel trilogy ended up being so bad that it absolutely murdered my interest in Star Wars, much in the same way Season 8 of Game of Thrones ruined that franchise for me. Disney continued to drive the franchise downward, and outside of the Star Wars Jedi series from Respawn, I have essentially sworn off all Star Wars media. It's a melancholic feeling to witness the dirge of something so beloved, and I wish I could say it is just Star Wars subjected to bastardization in the modern day. The bright light in this whole situation is how the old canon of Star Wars from the New Jedi Order and Lucasfilm days is still enjoyable since that whole series is complete, with every arc accounted for. And in 2024, the Star Wars games of my youth have seen a resurgence through remasters of Dark Forces and the Battlefront duology. I had this recurring dream when I was in high school around Battlefront II, where I would have to live out a year on each of the worlds in the game, from the fiery fury of Mustafar to the frigid fumigation of Hoth. Escapism was the only thing that kept me alive in those years, and dreams like this, propelled by my interactions with the Star Wars universe and its associated media products, provided me an out, freedom from the life forced onto me. In high school, Battlefront 2 would also change my life by becoming the catalyst by which I would create a brotherhood with one of the best people I've ever met. For this reason, the game has always held an important place in my media history. You're watching Rayl Deal Games, and in this Rayl Deal post-platinum review, I'm going to take a deep dive look into Star Wars Battlefront 2, the game that truly encapsulates all of my feelings regarding the Star Wars franchise. The importance of this game on my life can't be simply stated, because this is the game that gave me the opportunity to form the best friendship I've ever had. Because of this, I'll be looking at the game in terms of its impact on my life, class and level design, and completion criteria. By the end of this video, I'll explain how this game changed my life and why it is truly one of the greatest games ever made. With all of that established, let's dive right in. My best friend since 2009 has been John, who those of you who listen to my podcast have encountered on every single episode. But our friendship was something formed quite by accident. You see, I did not have a great childhood. In fact, I would say my life was pretty bad all the way until I was 18. Making friends was always tough for me because I'd never been great at connecting to anyone. But during my freshman year of high school, John and I would get a lunch table to ourselves because there was no one else in the cafeteria that we knew even in passing. John and I knew each other through Boy Scouts, which I had quit a few years prior, and that small thread of a connection predicated our seating predicament. Well, when you're sitting next to someone you kinda sorta know, you can't just sit there in silence because that's hella awkward. So we would talk first about Boy Scouts or class, but eventually one of us would bring up video games, and it was through video games we would become lifelong friends. The primary video game we first discussed was Star Wars Battlefront II. Something we both played hours upon hours in our life. For me, BF2 was still a newish game because I have always gotten games years after their original release. As I elucidated from the top, I was a huge, mega Star Wars fan in my youth, and during my freshman year of high school is when I would start reading Vector Prime, the first book in the 19-novel-long saga of the New Jedi Order. It's likely that me reading that book is what got John and I on the topic of Star Wars, the Yuuzhan Vong, and incidentally BF2 itself. For me, BF2 was another way for me to pass the time and escape my sordid surroundings, suffering not sorrow to exist in the forefront of my mind. I played hours of BF2 and I learned quickly how inferior I was at the game in comparison to John. At our first hangout during our sophomore year in high school, John completely gutted all of my starship's insides, thrashed me in instant action, and conquered me quickly in the early stages of Galactic Conquest. I was no match, and it was in that moment where I was confronted with something I had never experienced before. A person in real life was better than me at a video game I played religiously, a sacrilegious sanctimony that honestly improved our friendship. I enjoyed being challenged in our matches, and while we would never play this game again until somebody aspired to create a collection of the PS2 ports, that night of BF2, Vice City, and all the rest remains as a solid memory from my childhood and the core foundation of a friendship now in its 15th year. John was just better at this game and others than I was, and arguably, he still is to this very day in many ways. I'm just better at keeping calm about losing or when shit starts to really hit the fan, but that's partly why we've always gotten along so well. Our philosophies and mantras match close enough to make our connection strong, while also being different enough to stave off irrelevancy and redundancy. Our taste in games and media would shift over the years, but this formative connection kept us close when we were younger, and the ravages of adult life and disparate living experiences and college conditions would do little to make our friendship fade. With the release of the Classic Collection, I was hyped to replay this game, to relive those old emotions and feelings since I'm such a nostalgia nepotist. Aspyr's aspirations were high, bringing such beloved classics to modern hardware. So how did they do? By this point, the failings of the Classic Collection have been pretty well covered, but I didn't have that bad of an experience, all things considered. I never played the multiplayer as a kid, so I wasn't super interested in trying it out for this collection, and that seems to be primarily where the major complaints against the collection come from. While perfectly valid to criticize, I personally was unaffected by the server issues present in this game, so this problem never hurt my experience with my replay. There were also reports of graphical glitches on Hoth and how these were not present in the originals, which I raised my eyebrow at when I first heard of this issue players were having. Aspyr apparently used the PS2 port of the game for this collection, which made me expect to see both this graphical glitch for Hoth and one for Yavin 4's temple level. I remember these from when I was in high school, and since I only ever played the PS2 version of the game, I wonder if these problems are unique to the PS2 port. Maybe Aspyr could have used the Xbox port to circumvent these problems, but I never played that version, so I wouldn't be able to say definitively that that would have eliminated the graphical issues. People sometimes forget that older games definitely had glitches, especially with this idealized idolatry in which we sometimes look at games of yesteryear. The inclusion of Kit Fisto, Asajj Ventress, XL modes for Hoth and Geonosis, and the added Rinvar and Yavin levels were all great additions, and Aspyr, including those in this package, is an added bonus. All of that being said, there are a few issues with Aspyr's work that did hurt my experience with Battlefront 2. Starting off, the PS2 port of BF2 I played all those years ago never crashed. In fact, I don't know what a PS2 crashing even looks like because I've never seen it happen, despite gaming on one for literally thousands of hours. Yet, in 31 hours, BF2 on my PS5 crashed 3 times. 2 of those times were just software crashes, resetting some progress on one of my Galactic Conquest campaigns, but the third crash was a hardware one. Aspyr's BF2 crashed my freaking PS5, and when it didn't immediately turn back on, I thought it had bricked my whole system. And how did I manage to do this? Was I playing on XL mode and doing some crazy wild stuff? No. I was sniping on a bridge in my Guido. That's it. I was playing the game. What did Aspyr do with this game to create this issue, one that never existed before and doesn't exist in modern video games? Worse still than this is the way the final cutscene of the campaign, following success on the Hoth mission, didn't trigger for me. The campaign in BF2 is one of my favorite things about it, something I'll talk about more in depth in the next section of this review. So that cutscene not triggering was a particular disappointment for me. In addition to this, BF2 now has haptic feedback. Am I crazy, or is haptic feedback crazy overhyped? To be honest with you all, I actually dislike haptic feedback on games a lot, with the only exception being when a game uses haptic feedback to essentially make the R2 and L2 buttons function as if they they have two separate inputs. Most games don't do this though, and their haptic feedback integration is usually just making the bumper buttons harder to press. I'm going to be 30 next year, and I'm already starting to feel some soreness in my right index finger and thumb, which are definitely a consequence of a lifetime of gaming. The haptic feedback would make my index finger start to ache after an hour of game time, and despite looking in the menus, I couldn't find a way of disabling it. The original obviously didn't have haptic feedback, so that means Aspyr rooted around in the code to add the functionality, so why couldn't they provide an option of turning it off? I just really hope haptic feedback goes the way of the dodo, because it is such an instant turnoff for my enjoyment of games. I could just conclude the video here and treat this like some type of hobbled together video essay, but I couldn't do one of my favorite games dirty like that. Despite the issues instigated by Aspyr, BF2 is still one of the best video games ever made, and I don't want to end this video without making that clear. There are several aspects of the game to break down, so in the following sections I'll be discussing BF2 in terms of its campaign, Galactic Conquest, and completion criteria, and in addition to that, I'll have a section ranking all of the classes in the game and a final section ranking all the levels from worst to best. Feel free to click around to any section you are most interested in, and if you're liking the video so far, maybe consider dropping a like, leaving a comment, and subscribing for more Rayl Deal gaming videos. Well, let's get back to it, shall we? For the longest time, Battlefront 2's campaign was my favorite Star Wars story. Following the journal of a 501st Legionnaire, BF2's story puts the battles of the Clone Wars and Galactic Civil War into a different perspective, that being via the eyes of a trooper with his boots on the ground. Clones and the Clone Wars are my legit favorite thing about Star Wars. The idea of a galactic conflict between mass-produced robots and genetically engineered clones is genius, and is the epitome of ethical quandaries in a fictional sci-fi world. Before and after each mission, there's this faded machinima detailing the feelings of the 501st Legionnaire, and I always found this to be a genius way of integrating a story into an arcadey game like BF2. Reflecting on it retrospectively, it's still pretty great, but there are definitely elements of set-piece design that began to be a thing during the 7th generation that could have improved the cutscenes somewhat. The flashback feel of the cutscenes are a major strong point though, and I wouldn't know how to preserve that feel while also including more contemporary cutscene design. The missions themselves are pretty alright. Each takes a handful of minutes to finish, and some are pretty well designed, creating epic feeling conflicts in a game that could originally only handle 33 characters plus the occasional Ewok or Geonosian walking around. Starting out, Geonosis makes a solid tutorial level for the game, showing the player all of the core mechanics of BF2, from capturing CPs, capturing flags in the form of a holocron for this level, and killing enemies. The way the narrator talks about the heat and sand, especially the ways in which he was surprised to be able to make it out of there, is a perfect prelude to the other conflicts that come up over the course of the campaign. Some of these trials and tribulations are emotional, and this is shown through the levels that involve and reference Order 66. Juxtaposing the Megiddo and Felucia missions, the campaign does a better job than the films of making the clones more personable and therefore easier to empathize with. In Megiddo, the 501st is tasked with secretly receiving an experimental power source, the very same one that would later become the main gun of the Death Star. The way the narrator talks about Ki-Adi-Mundi shows the way the clones viewed different Jedi, as this same narrator shows some respect for Aayla Secura at the end of the Felucia mission.
It's been said that the 501st got the best of the war. We also got the worst. On Felucia, the Seps dug their metal heels into the muck of that alien hellhole and dared the Republic to come in after them. So we did. Only to be met with the month after month of flesh-eating diseases, shrieking nocturnal predators, and other sights that haunt me to this day. Cut off and for all we knew, abandoned by our superiors. Our only hope was Aayla Secura, our Jedi commander. Without her iron will, none of us would have come out of that mess with our sanity or our lives. When her death came, I hope it was quick. She earned that much. When the 501st was finally rotated out of Felucia, Aayla Secura made a point of seeing us off personally, calling us the bravest soldiers she'd ever seen. It's a good thing we were wearing helmets, because none of us could bear to look her in the eye.
For Ki-Adi-Mundi, the big takeaway from the Megiddo mission for the narrator is the fact that the Jedi can be fooled and can therefore also be killed. In this case, the narrator has an unerring ambivalence for Ki-Adi-Mundi, subtly informing the player to the way Mundi likely interacts with the clones. He likely treats them with indifference, and the clones respond in kind. For Aayl Secura, it's a different story entirely. The Felucia intro cinematic always made me feel like Felucia was analogous to the real-life Vietnam War, with the way the clones were subject to hard jungle conditions, disease, and dangerous animals. The narrator also reveals in this cutscene the way the clones suffered from PTSD, with the way he says, "and other sights that haunt me to this day." He goes on to say that without Aayl Secura's iron will, none of us would have made it out of that mess with our sanity or our lives. When her death came, I hope it was quick. She earned that much. That wish for a quick death shows respect from the clones, and in Revenge of the Sith, this is the reason the clones shoot Aayl Secura so much. They don't want her to suffer, so they riddle her with blaster bolts so that she'll die quickly. This respect is further demonstrated in BF2 with the way the 501st clones couldn't bear to look Secura in the eye when she calls them the bravest soldiers she'd ever seen. Their shame was indicative of their fear, and so when they would become Vader's fist during the assault of the Jedi Temple, they were likely happy to be responsible for the murdering of every single Padawan. To them, that job was easier than being responsible for putting Secura down. When the 501st is dispatched to Coruscant for Order 66, the narrator mentions that some of the clones may have had seditious thoughts. However, no one said anything, committing themselves to their orders instead. This scene always gave off "I was just following order" vibes, which is something former Nazi or Nazi-adjacent soldiers would say in reference to their wartime atrocities. The clones having this mentality further shows their humanity, and one core theme in clone-based Star Wars storylines is the question of whether they are truly human or not, given their genetic and psychological programming. The ethical and moral quandaries the clones face during Order 66 is a far more compelling aspect of the Clone Wars plot than them having some chip in their head, which is the retcon the Clone Wars TV show would add. This constant foreshadowing to Order 66 is one of the reasons I like the early parts of this campaign so much. But in the battle on Kashyyyk, the foreshadowing for the 501st Empire days begins, and in the outro cutscene, the 501st subjugation of Kashyyyk and enslavement of the Wookiee population is referenced. At the time of BF2's release, this was an important part of the canon too, since Han Solo would meet Chewbacca during one of these Imperial slave trades, freeing his future friend and becoming the smuggler with a heart of gold we all know and love. Perhaps some of the best parts of BF2's campaign are the missions on Mustafar and Kamino, where the Empire faction has to fight the CIS and Republic factions respectively. This is the only case where the Clone Wars and Galactic Civil War factions interact, and it makes for some pretty cool gameplay sequences, especially since both the creation of the new droids and clones makes sense from the perspectives of the Geonosians and Kaminoans, creating them in a last-ditch bid for their freedom from the tyranny of Palpatine's empire. In the outro cutscene of the Kamino mission, it's revealed that the Empire diversified their cloning samples following the ill-fated Clone Rebellion, making the clones of the 501st the last remaining pure-blooded Clone Wars-era clones. This creates some interesting gameplay challenges since it seems like the player receives less reinforcements with each mission past this point, properly integrating this little piece of the lore into the way future levels play out. The 501st clones take another huge hit after the destruction of the Death Star.
When the Death Star was destroyed, about half of the 501st Legion was still in the hangar getting into their ships. Of those who made it out, another third were caught in the explosion. I'd fought with some of those men for over 20 years.
Where 1/3 of the entire Legion is caught in the explosion as they are trying to flee. Considering their dwindling numbers following the end of more pure-blooded recruits, there's a somber nature to the way the narrator talks about this happening in the lead up to the Yavin 4 space battle. He'd known most of those clones for 20 years, and from this point on, the 501st's last missions become motivated by vengeance. They might be following orders still, but now they are doing so while on an emotional crusade. By the end of the Yavin 4 mission, it's clear the narrator is a far different man than he was on Geonosis.
By the time we landed on Yavin, whatever shock we'd felt at the destruction of the Death Star had been replaced by anger. For months we treated the rebellion like a disobedient child, only to be repaid for our tolerance with treachery on an unimaginable scale. Frankly, I don't remember much of the fighting. I guess we won.
During the Clone Wars, war was hell, but over the course of the Imperial days, he begins to relish conquering and subjugating insurgent worlds. The way the narrator talks about the rebellion, referring to them as disobedient children that they had treated with tolerance up until the Death Star, demonstrates the way he grew to be able to justify the heinous actions he and the other 501st committed over the course of their tenure as Vader's Fist. Juxtaposing these final missions with his statements during Order 66 on Coruscant, the narrator becomes unsympathetic in his old age, but this element of the writing of BF2 is part of the campaign's genius. We're seeing snapshots of a clone's thoughts spread over the course of 20 plus years, and the psychological development of this character is the backbone of BF2's entire story. Within his thoughts are the themes and corruption of the 501st. In many ways, the clones themselves follow the trajectory of the Sith. At the beginning, they have fear of death and a longing for peace. By the time they become Vader's Fist, their fear became anger, and that anger became hate following the destruction of the Death Star. That hate leads them to further suffering, but unlike Vader, they never attain redemption by the end.
No one ever complained about the cold on Hoth. We never felt it, even though we were blinded by blizzards. We could see the final end of the rebellion in our blaster sights. Was it only a mirage, perhaps? But on that day, on that planet, our blood ran hot with dreams of victory, melting the ice that stood in our way. As the rebels fled, the 501st gathered around a burning bunker and let out a cheer that shook the stars. The rebellion was done. The Death Star was being rebuilt bigger than ever. Order had finally returned to the galaxy, in no small part due to the efforts of the fighting men of the 501st.
Hoth is the final mission of BF2's campaign. At the end of it, the narrator announces the peace and prosperity of the Empire, the rebuilding of the Death Star, and the chorus cheering of the remaining 501st. But with the campaign fading to black, at the conclusion of this cutscene, a darker end of the story is implied. Why is this the final cutscene of the game? Why isn't there a mission for Endor? The answer to these questions is simple. The narrator doesn't survive the final conflict of Return of the Jedi. He dies, either on Endor or on the second Death Star, and with the conclusion of the Endor battle, the 501st, likely in total, are eradicated. They succumb to the suffering secreted via their hate. With only 18 minutes of cutscene content, BF2's campaign tells a better story by showing its themes than most modern video games, and that's the primary reason I love it so much. I remember wanting more when I finished the campaign originally, but since the game didn't provide me with any more missions, I decided to RP, or roleplay, my own through one of BF2's best modes, Galactic Conquest. Growing up, Galactic Conquest is where I spent a lot of my time playing BF2, and the main reason for this is because I would treat this mode as a role-playing one, where I would pretend to be the commanding officer of whatever faction I was playing. This external aspect of Galactic Conquest did mean that I enjoyed the CIS the least, but that's not really an admonishment of that faction's gameplay strengths though. Because I played through them a lot as a kid, and once again each as an adult, I've gotten to see the Galactic Conquest reward machinimas a lot, and I really appreciate the what-if nature of Star Wars during this era. The Revenge of the Sith movie tie-in video game had this really cool aspect to the final level where the player could choose to play as either Obi-Wan or Anakin in their final confrontation. Choosing Anakin generates a what-if scenario where Darth Vader kills Obi-Wan and Darth Sidious, taking control of the Empire with the 501st himself. The endings to the Galactic Conquest campaigns do this as well, with the Rebellion cutscene being the only one reflecting the canon of the franchise, since it just shows the way Return of the Jedi canonically ends. There is this really cool scene in it where Luke is standing in the ruins of the Jedi Temple on Coruscant though, and I always considered this to be the jumping off point for his making the new Jedi Order on Yavin 4, meaning this ending, at least at the time of BF2's release, led really nicely into the new Jedi Order continuity. The others aren't even remotely canon though, making each a good bit of fun to earn and watch. Of the non-Rebellion endings, the CIS have the weakest one, where Count Dooku defeats Anakin, the other core leaders of the CIS stare menacingly into the camera, and droids kill a bunch of clones. This is the weakest one because there's no real story to it. Palpatine wasn't really on the side of the CIS, as he canonically betrayed both them and the Republic to create his empire. It would have been cooler if Count Dooku killed Sidious and Anakin while also making Obi-Wan submit to the dark side. Dooku is the primary champion of the CIS after all. In the Empire's ending, Boba Fett and Jabba keep Han Solo trapped in carbonite forever. Sidious forces Luke to submit to the dark side, and Darth Vader chokes Leia to death, and the second Death Star's construction is completed. While this ending is bleak, it is consistent with Palpatine's goals, making it a great end for the Empire. Likewise, the Republic's ending is a good one for the Jedi themselves. In it, Obi-Wan defeats Grievous, Windu kills Palpatine, and the Jedi heroically win their battles against the droids alongside the clones, who because of Palpatine's death never receive Order 66, and Anakin becomes a fully fledged Jedi Master, keeping his seat on the Jedi Council. As a kid, earning these cutscenes always felt so epic because they usually followed fairly dynamic back and forth conquests, tactical gambits, and close matches. As an adult, I found the conquest mode to be much easier, and I think this is just because I'm smarter now than I was at 14. I literally never lost a level over the course of 4 full campaigns, and the reason is because I maintained the holy trinity of bonuses, Garrison, Blaster, and Sabotage, in conjunction with bigger brain strategic engagements. While Hero is obviously the strongest bonus in the entire mode, it gets boring winning with heroes all the time, and I did that enough as a kid. Because I was going for the platinum this time too, I was incentivized to not use heroes or villains, so I never picked up the hero power-up in any of these 4 Galactic Conquest campaigns. Success in Galactic Conquest comes from 2 fronts. 1, just playing the game well, both on land and in space, and 2, paying attention to the action economy of the fleet management sections of the gameplay. Saving on movement is an imperative for quickly conquering the galaxy, so buying a Starfleet on one sector on the other side of the galaxy map is a great way of diversifying fronts of conquest and saving on movement. I didn't do it this time around playing the game, but once you've locked down a sector, it's sometimes a good strategy to intentionally lose a space battle because it makes buying a fleet in a different sector much more affordable. There is a risk to this play in that if you lose one of your planets, clearing a conquest gets more annoying though. Space battles are one of the more interesting things to navigate in Galactic Conquest campaigns too. Essentially, the player never wants to be the one to start a space battle with the CPU in any event other than above a planet, because doing so will create a situation where the player typically is forced to engage in more space battles. This is the core reason the Galactic Conquest mode felt like it took so long as a kid, because I always just moved forward, heedless of what the CPU was doing. But starting a space battle in the middle of nowhere essentially makes it so that the player loses a turn of movement, since they could get closer to the win state of the mode by just conquering a planet in another quadrant of the galactic map. Baiting the computer into starting all space battles cuts down the number the player has to do by a significant amount, and allows the player to use all of their turns on pressuring and conquering planets, creating this cosmic snowball effect where the player gets all of the income and growth and the computer is on the back foot the entire time. In each of my campaigns during this play of BF2, the computer never had enough money to buy any units beyond the box standard assault class, which ironically made the Republic Conquest a little more annoying for me because I had to face hordes of super battle droids being complete and utter crack shots with their missiles. I would sometimes go to a CP and be fired at by 3 missiles aimed perfectly at my head in a row, meaning I died the most during my Republic run, whereas with all the others I was averaging 40 to 50 kills in a round with an average KDR of 15 to 20. My average KDR during the Republic campaigns was closer to 6 or 7 because of the obnoxious one-hit kill nature of the super battle droids and their missiles. Galactic Conquest is a great mode for a game like BF2, and considering the fact RTSs and 4X strategy games were still at the height of their popularity during this time, with games like Empire at War releasing only 4 months after this game, the Pandemic team were geniuses including this mode with BF2. Considering what gamers were interested in during the mid-2000s, BF2 was the complete package, providing great Star Wars action, a great story, and some succulent strategy to cap off this hearty meal of a game. After completing the campaign, I jumped right into Galactic Conquest with the express goal to have a great time and whittle away at the completion criteria for this game's Platinum Trophy. What makes a good trophy list? Completing games should always make the game a more enjoyable experience, either through the content inside the game or the challenge associated with completion. To me, there are two things that matter for making a game's completion process good, and those two things are, number one, challenges that prompt the player to experiment with all of the gameplay mechanics within the game, and two, requirements that prompt the player to see all or most of the game's content. In terms of these two pieces of criteria, the Battlefront collection mostly succeeds. The worst trophies are honestly the ones tied to the first Battlefront, which require the player play through the 2 campaigns of that game, trip an AT-AT with a snowspeeder, and knock a Jedi off the edge of a map. The last one of those is somewhat broken too. When I attempted it, I knocked Luke off the map in one game, and then it popped as soon as I started my second attempt, before I had even set eyes on Luke in that round. Fortunately, none of these trophies are too challenging, and these all serve as a good tutorial before jumping into Battlefront II, which is the far, far superior game. And that's why the remaining trophies are all in Battlefront II. All of the remaining trophies, save for one, are tied to acquiring a total of 64 medals for each medal type. The non-medal trophy is a simple completion of the campaign requirement. Now, when the game came out, I saw general discourse complain about the design of this trophy list, but nearly all of these complaints were centered around the grind. The thing is, the grind in BF2 is not bad at all if the player doesn't try to force it and plans out their medal acquisition in strategic ways. First and foremost, completion should always be viewed with the ultimate goal of enjoying the game to its fullest, which many of the creators making BF2 Platinum videos a few months ago didn't seem to try and do. I can definitely see how treating these medal trophies as a grind would make them unenjoyable, but that's not what I did. It might seem like a novel concept, but I just played the game, taking my time with it so as to get the best experience. That's the reason my videos always come out a couple months after the release of a game after all, and I know going in that is going to sacrifice my kairotic appeal, costing me views. That's the reason these guys do it this way, and it's unfortunate because they really ruined their own enjoyment of the game. The way I approach this game is simple. I played first through the campaign, then did a Galactic Conquest run with each faction, a mode many of the completion reviewers for the game just didn't even seem to try out, and finished it up by setting up lengthy, looping playlists of my favorite maps to finish out the rest of the medal acquisition process. I played BF2 a lot as a kid, so I was set up to have a better understanding of efficient and fun ways of earning the trophies, including the levels that make the two most annoying medals, Demolisher and Technician, easier to get. Starting out with the Demolisher trophy, take a look at what John Callum, the first content creator covering the completion process I watched, did to accomplish this task.
For the demolition medals, you need to get 4 critical hits with a rocket launcher, and the forms guided me to hit in between where the legs and the body connect on these spider droids. So I locked in, and 3 hours later had 64 of the demolition medals, along with some other medals.
This is a crazy inefficient way of grinding out these medals, taking twice as long as when I did it. What I did, and what I suggest all of you do if you end up going for this platinum, is simple. Go to instant action, dig into the settings for conquest matches, set the number of AI to 0, set up a playlist of just Hoth, and play as the rebels. Spawn in at Echo Base, hop into a snowspeeder, and jet all the way over to the AT-ATs. Touch down next to them, shoot their neck 4 times in a row to earn a medal, respawn and repeat. Once elite rank is unlocked, the number of required crit hits reduces to 3, making the process go even faster. It took me about 90 minutes to earn all 64 Demolisher medals, which is a painless grind indeed. I just put on one podcast and I was finished by the time the podcast was over. The second annoying medal to earn is Technician, for no other reason than the fact that earning it times the player out from earning another one until the bonus wears off. However, since the Engineer is the only class to be able to earn this, I suggest that you leave all regulator medals for the same time you're working on Technician. There are some great levels for Technician grinds, and they are Megiddo, Kashyyyk, Yavin 4 Temple, Naboo, Felucia, and Utapau. Setting up a playlist with these 7 levels allows the player to grind Technician in tandem with other medals, and my preferred way of approaching this medal grind is to earn medals in loops, meaning I would get a Regulator and a Technician medal right off the bat, then switch to a different class to get another medal before switching back. In this way, the medal grind doesn't feel like a grind at all, and all of the trophies then serve to improve the fun of just playing the game. It took me 31 hours to pop the plat, but at least one of those hours was gained by leaving the game on once while I cooked dinner one night. 30 hours is hardly what I would call a grindy trophy list. There were a few annoying things I encountered in my platinum playthrough though, and by far the worst thing was when I had set up a long capture the flag game on Death Star to earn some medals while having a good time playing the game, and the game crashed because I crouched on a bridge. This sucked because not only did I think this bricked my PS5 for a few minutes, but I also lost 10 medals I'd earned. As a kid, I'd earned 300 plus Frenzy Regulator and War Hero medals, making it so I had the reward weapons essentially permanently. So I was a little taken aback when I reached legendary status with each of the weapons and the guns still needed to be re-earned. This isn't a complaint, it is more of a recognition of just how much I played this game as a kid. The requirements get easier as you rank up each medal, making the leap from elite to legendary actually take less time than getting to elite in the first place. There are some levels that make some of the other medals like Marksman easier. In the case of getting headshots, I find Coruscant, Dagobah, Death Star, Tantive 4, and Camino easiest for this. Camino in Galactic Conquest is a particularly great place to earn marksman medals, since the opening conflict of that map usually involves 10 super battle droids walking across a bridge, making it easy to earn one marksman medal within 30 seconds of the battle starting. From there, using the medal rotation strategy I outlined earlier, a battle on Camino usually yields 3 marksman medals, 4 to 5 if elite rank is already earned. Planning out the best ways to get medals is an important part of completing BF2, and this is also how it worked back on the PS2. As with any completion process, rushing to the end just makes the whole experience worse, and in all 60 of my platinum trophies, this has invariably been true. I rate trophies on a bronze, silver, gold, or platinum basis, and for the Battlefront Classic Collection, I'm going to give it a gold, meaning I recommend this completion process for any fans of BF2. It's a pretty great trophy list which, if you go in with the mindset of enjoying the game, prompts you to enjoy every one of the game's systems to their fullest. If there's one complaint I can levy at this completion process, it's just that the specialist classes aren't represented in the trophy list, which is a damn shame because they're pretty good. I could hardly call this video a Battlefront II retrospective without talking about those classes, so in the next section, I'll be ranking all 13 unique non-hero classes from worst to best. Number 13. The absolute worst class in BF2 is the Imperial Officer. Each class's playability is down to the combination of their toolkit, health pool, and mobility, and the Imperial Officer is garbage in all 3 categories. He does have the ability to create an AoE damage buff for himself and any allied units in range, which is a nice bit of kit, and because of this I might have ranked him a little higher if I could have tested him out on multiplayer matches. Even with this buff, I don't imagine I'd want to pick him over any of the other classes in the game. His main gun is that sonic shot that the Geonosians have, and this projectile has never been great for me. The good aspect of it is that it permits adjacent damage even when a shot misses by a little bit, but the damage output even with the buff is so low that this blaster is one of the weakest, least versatile weapons in the entire game. His secondary grenade launcher is just okay as well. There's a reason grenade launchers are less common in this game, and that's because they weren't that great in the original. Number 12. The Magna Guard is the last class in this game I would classify as bad. However, it is a better class than the Imperial Officer by a lot. This is because the Magna Guard's toolkit is a bit better, although this comes at the cost of its health pool. Its main gun is a semi-automatic missile launcher, which kills instantly upon headshot, and his secondary is the other grenade launcher in BF2. In addition to these, it gets a recon droid, which is weak but good for evaluating threat levels before engagements, and a single-use neurotoxin. The neurotoxin is an AoE poison ability that only affects clones, meaning that in quarter conflicts it can be used to great effect by rolling into the middle of a bunch of clones, dropping a toxin and killing everyone. While cool, a simple thermal detonator could elicit the same effect. In addition to this, the Magna Guard is far too squishy to make good use of the neurotoxin, given its AoE nature. Number 11. Of the faction androgynous classes, the Demolitioner is my least favorite one. It's not a terrible class, coming with a decent kit of rocket launcher, blaster sidearm, and thermal detonators. The only real issue with the heavy classes is that everything it does is something a different base class does better. Number 10. The Droideka is borderline broken in the first Battlefront game, but in the sequel it feels incredibly nerfed. While other classes benefited from increased mobility and versatile toolkits, the Droideka doesn't get as much of a boost. Its shield is much weaker than the first game, meaning it does require some thought as to the best places to set up as a Droideka versus the first game. It's still easy to get several kills in a row, but the slow slow movement makes it a bit less fun to play than its contemporaries. Number 9. The Jet Trooper's mobility is the most versatile in the game, and to balance this out, he has a health pool similar to the Sharpshooter class. Considering the one-shot kills coming from his main launcher, access to the god-tier thermal detonators, and the hardy sidearm blaster, Jet Troopers are a fun class to romp around with on certain levels. Other levels, such as Camino, that are great for snipers, make Jet Troopers a bit worse since a body shot from a sniper is deadly. All in all, Jet Troopers are incredibly useful in cracking open some tricky CPs, giving it some great utility via its mobility. Number 8. Bothan Spies aren't really strong, but they are super fun to play. After playing through BF2 for well over 100 hours in my life, it's fun to remix the gameplay a little by turning this shooter into a stealth title. And I love sleuthing around as a Bothan Spy to capture CPs behind enemy lines, especially the Empire's frozen field point on Hoth. Bothan Spies also have a pretty decent toolkit with their main gun, the Disintegrator, which can kill a couple close range enemies simultaneously, activatable stealth field in their sidearm slot, and one of the best support abilities in the game, the Back to Field. The Back to Field gives the Bothan Spy and all nearby allies a regeneration buff for a period of time, making them all much harder to kill. Number 7. I love sniper classes in games. When I used to play Rainbow Six Siege during quarantine, I used to play Callie the most because of her 50 caliber sniper rifle. And while the Sharpshooter class sniper rifle isn't as satisfying to shoot, it's still a fun time. Sitting back behind a line of AI troops makes it easy to survive as the comparatively low health sniper class, and whenever enemies do get close, this class comes with the old trusty thermal grenades and blaster sidearm. This class may have been a bit higher, save for the fact that I've never enjoyed the reward rifle earned from getting 6 headshot kills. It is the only case in this game where the reward weapon makes the class less useful since it cuts down the range of the sniper rifle significantly, forcing the player to play at an unsafe range. The benefit of the gun is that it can kill several enemies at once, making it more useful on corridor levels such as the Death Star and Tantive 4. Number 6. The reward weapon of the Sharpshooter class is the primary reason I like the Wookiee class more. The Wookiee sharpshooting crossbow is a decent enough weapon, having some real versatility for effective ranges. With a press of the trigger, it is a horizontal buckshot of bolts, and with a longer press it turns into a sniper bolt. With the highest health pool of any class in the game, save perhaps the ARC Trooper, Wookiees are tough cookies to crack, making it a class that's easy to grind up a lot of kills with without risking many deaths. Number 5. The Assault class comes in with a blaster rifle, blaster sidearm, and thermal detonators. While being the most basic class in the game, it is particularly strong in most situations. The rifle does decent damage up close or at range, and when the reward rifle is earned, the class ascends into the God tier, because the Frenzy Medal upgrades the base blaster rifle into a 3-round burst, one-shot, one-kill machine. When enemies are lined up in tight corridors, this upgraded rifle can kill 3 enemies in one shot by aiming at the head of the first in a line. Beyond this rifle makes killing heroes easy, and all of the high health classes like the Wookiee, Heavy, and ARC Trooper fall quickly to 1 or 2 shots from this gun. Pairing power with a decent sized health bar and movement speed makes the Assault class one of my go-to classes in a Conquest match. Number 4. Even though there are slight differences between each faction's version of each class based on the specific gun they use, I'm only making a distinction this one time because the Super Battle Droid is very different. The missile is a great boon, and the AI are absolutely crack shots with it. The shotgun secondary is much better than the basic blaster too. Just like with the other Assault classes present in the Republic, Rebellion, and Empire, the Super Battle Droid can get the upgraded 3-round burst rifle, making it just a strict upgrade to all the rest. Number 3. The ARC Trooper is the last class to have an AoE support item of some kind. His provides a defense bonus to all allies within range, and this makes him one of the harder classes to kill. This is paired with a shoulder-mounted minigun, which can tear through hordes of enemies in no time flat. ARC Troopers get countered somewhat by Droidicas, but that's the only class that can give the ARC Troopers a little bit of trouble. Number 2. The Dark Trooper is the best class to use in corridor-based levels, and the reason for this is his main gun, the Electricity Thrower. A full charge can easily kill a gathered group of 8 or more enemies, save for Wookiees who have enough health to survive. If that weren't enough, Dark Troopers get thermal detonators and a command pistol, the latter of which is great for cleaning up whatever the Electric Thrower didn't kill outright. On top of all of this, the Dark Trooper gets a jetpack, and while it has less mobility than the Jet Troopers, it's still still great at evading tricky combat engagements. The jetpack also provides the Dark Trooper with a great way of pouncing on a group of enemies, since the player is able to start charging up his laser during the jump, unleashing a full charge upon landing. Number 1. The best class in Battlefront 2 is the Engineer Base class. This class's kit is god tier from the very beginning, coming with a one-shot boomstick that gets better once a regulator medal is earned, jetpacks, self-sustainability via the back-to-ammo drops, and the sole ability in the game to slice into vehicles, throwing the vehicle fights wildly into the player's favor. These tools are the only ones a player needs to stomp through levels, and really the only cases where the engineer is something I don't pick is when I want a different class for variety's sake. Over the course of my many hours playing BF2, I played all of these classes enough to be confident in my ranking of them. But there's one more ranking for me to do before closing out this review. Number 23. The worst maps in Battlefront 2 are the maps ported over from the original game. I never liked this map in the first game because a lot of the levels from the first game just aren't that well designed. It's much easier to play on with the improved AI and the more versatile nature of the classes in this game, but I would have preferred the other Bespin map. However, I realized that was likely impossible because of the Starship redesign in BF2. It's clear that the AI in BF2 weren't designed around these new levels, as the AI is a bit broken on Bespin. They are constantly running into walls. The carbonite freezing machine in the center of the building complex is a cool location from the film, but the design of the rest of the level just isn't super great. Number 22. Yavin 4 Arena is a cool idea for a level, but I've never felt that battles here are particularly strong. There's some real congestion in the stairways leading out both ends of the temple, but these choke points can be circumvented completely by just walking around the temple. A well-placed sniper on the outskirt edges of the arena is easily able to crack open the stalemate with a few well-aimed headshots. Beyond this aspect of its design, there aren't any CPs on this level I particularly enjoy fighting for. Number 21. Rinvar Harbor is not balanced at all when the Empire are involved because they get a freaking AT-AT. This is the second and only other level where AT-ATs are, and there aren't any snowspeeders to counter them this time around. Levels that are unfair one way or the other are worse by default, as a good game is one that is properly balanced to account for asymmetrical faction design. In the original, the ice caves were an impregnable bloodbath of bouncing bombs, but in this, the advanced and more versatile toolkits of BF2 classes makes it easier to crack through. The ice caves being an absolute hellhole to fight through was, in a masochistic way, one of my favorite things about this level in the original Battlefront. The clunky design of the gameplay in that game made that particular point kind of fun to engage in, but with the way it's easier to maneuver, push, and retreat in BF2, more or less trivializes the myth of the ice caves. Number 20. This level and every level after it is something I would consider good to some degree. BF2 has some great levels that are super fun to play on with every available class. Kashyyyk is a nice open battlefield facilitating hectic vehicle conflicts. The way the wooden walls and main gate at the oil refinery end of the level work creates some cool base assault RP. When playing as the CIS or Empire, knocking down the wooden walls and taking the oil refinery is one of my favorite parts of playing through this level. There are 2 points in this level tied to the vehicle spawns, and while the Republic and Rebellion can lose their vehicle producing spot and still win, the CIS and Empire cannot afford to lose theirs and still have a hope of achieving victory. As such, the first thing I do when playing the Republic or Rebellion is to take the point in their backline, severely hurting their chances of being able to properly assault the oil refinery. The sniping platform in the middle is a bit of a trap honestly, but it is a great way to circumvent the hell of trying to cross the lake by foot. So that's typically my way of reaching the Empire or CIS's backline in a fairly safe manner. Number 19. Utapau's vehicle lane is absolute hell at times to fight on, but it does create decent opportunities for slicing into vehicles for some good technician medals, and there are some insane high-density blaster bouts right outside of the hangar always, creating a bloody bash and a good time. The highway CP is the one I typically find myself competing for, but sometimes I like to backline the hangar, cutting off the opponent's access to their vehicle spawns. Number 18. My Guido might look pretty dreadful, but that's the only bad thing about it. The big circular middle with the 2 vehicle outposts provides 2 great positions to shoot for throughout the whole match. My Guido is even better than Utapau for nabbing technician medals during fun conquest matches. This level is a bit harder than the others to backline the vehicle spawning CP, making it even more satisfying to pull off. The highway leading towards the Republic and Rebellion's vehicle CP is particularly enjoyable to fight on because of its 3-lane structure and the holes dotting the main middle lane. Number 17. This is one of the better levels from the original, and it's even better here by the nature of this game just playing better. The key combat points are all centered around the aqueduct, making that place a real hellhole at times when all of the vehicles start shooting at each other there. The temple itself can be fun to fight for too, although most of the time the game's over by the time the CIS or Empire get the chance to actually go for it. When playing the Republic or Rebellion, backlining the enemy's vehicle spawning CP is a great way of ending dicey matches decisively. Number 16. Rinvar's Citadel is the last of the OG BF levels in Aspyr's re-release, and with how weak these levels kind of are, it makes sense they were originally left out of BF2's original release. I would have been fine with them being left out of this release too, save for this one. The Citadel is a genuinely fun level to play on, and I particularly love the multiple pathways and venues of attack. It really feels like a castle assault at times with some of the points. Because of the intertwining passages, overlooks, and choke points, this level can be approached in many different ways too, making it especially great to play over and over again. Number 15. Polis Massa is chief among the cluster corridor conflict levels. The initial conflict in the Med Bay, where Padme gives birth to Luke and Leia, is an absolute mess of a mashing melee. Polis Massa is the only level where I constantly find myself in a position where I've got to solo the last 20 or 30 enemy units in the level because of how absolutely devastating that conflict is for my allied AI pals. Sometimes I forget that this level has an outer vehicle section because it's not an area of the level I ever pursue that often. That secondary venue of attack opens up some interesting possibilities for cracking open the brutal congested CP competition that frames the core of Polis Massa conquests. Number 14. Dagobah is a great level. There are essentially 2 avenues of attack, left or right. The path with the downed X-Wing or drop ship is the most fun in my opinion, and this is the best level with water on it, which adds an element to the gameplay since water stops damage from blaster bolts. Yoda is the Rebellion and Republic hero for this level, and he's impossible to shoot while in water because of its restrictive properties. This is true on Kashyyyk as well, but Dagobah's water is centered on a CP, making this aspect of water combat with Yoda even more oppressive. The underground area where Luke confronts the Force shade of Darth Vader in Empire Strikes Back is also a pretty awesome area to fight in too. And that CP has the added bonus of having Darth Vader's ominous breathing in the background. The only thing I would have loved added to this level would be the swamp monster that pulls R2-D2 under the water in Empire Strikes Back. The PS1 game Star Wars Demolition had that monster in it, and to me, it's such an iconic part of Dagobah that it's a travesty to have a Dagobah level without it included. Number 13. Camino is loaded with some great combat zones, including the interior cloning facility locations. This level does have a big problem of creating situations where the player is just killed by something that they could have never seen coming because of the verticality in conjunction with the open platforms area. On the other hand, that area of the level is a sharpshooter's dream, creating an S-tier opportunity to grind out some marksman medals, especially with the way the AI opponents love to man the laser turrets, placing them in a position vulnerable to snipes. Number 12. The main courtyard of Naboo can be attacked from 5 different directions, and throughout most conquest battles, it creates the core of the conflict. Taking the other points is typically a secondary focus for the AI, despite how taking those positions makes the center easier to defend, especially if the opponent faction is cut off from using their vehicles. This level is one of the more beautiful ones, and the multiple venues of attacks makes it a level that's always fun to play. Number 11. Felucia has 2 areas I love. The river area is a great place for super soaked symphonies of death, providing the player not only a hectic clash of blaster bolts, but also another great opportunity for technician medals. The CP on the tree stump is my other favorite location here, because I've always loved levels and locations that mimic a stronghold assault type thing. Facing Worlds from Unreal Tournament is a perfect example of this. The tree stump CP can be attacked in multiple ways, but my favorite one involves climbing up the roots to reach the top, which is much faster and much cooler than taking the spiral path around the stump. Number 10. Technically, there are several different space battle levels, but I'm wrapping them all into one because they rarely ever feel different. One space level might have more assault ships or asteroids than another, but these external elements never change my impression of a space battle. Essentially, there are two ways of playing a space battle. Either the player engages in dogfights and destroys systems and support ships via the cockpit of their preferred starship, or they sabotage the enemy ship from within. There's really no other way for a space battle to go, although I suppose the player could choose to man a turret and grind up enough points to win the round that way. That doesn't seem like a particularly fun way of approaching these types of levels though. Number 9. Jabba's Palace used to be higher up on the list for me because I loved all of the nods to the film, with Han Solo being frozen in carbonite, Jabba's presence in the center CP of the level, the trapdoor leading to the Rancor in the basement, and the Gamorrean guards being a general nuisance the entire time. These aspects of the level have lost their luster over time, however, the level is clearly still one of my favorites. As with most interior levels, the congested nature of a lot of conflicts create excellent opportunities to get massive multi-kills with grenades, and the general design of the level is conducive for approaching points from multiple different angles, making it so that a choke point doesn't dominate the entire duration of a level, such as is the case on Polis Massa for example. Variety is the slice of life, and Jabba apparently designed his palace to accommodate the bloodthirsty bouts of BF2. Number 8. I spent so much time on Mos Eisley while playing this as a kid. This level is a nice combination of open level design with corridor paths that the competing teams file down, while also including these useful alleyways to help crack open over congested battles. Levels like this make playing every single class in the game fun, and it's to this level's credit that I still love it despite the fact that this is likely my second most played level in the entire game. I do kind of wish the other Tatooine level from the original Battlefront could have been put in this game somewhere, because the Sarlacc pit is sorely missed in BF2, but I understand why Pandemic went with Mos Eisley. The Sarlacc pit and Tusken Raiders are the only two aspects of the other map that are cool, and Mos Eisley is just far more iconic. Number 7. Endor is much better designed in BF2 than in the first game. Through a combination of more mobility in this game, just in general, and some cleaned up visuals, this level gets so much easier to navigate over its original incarnation. The ATSTs on the level are super easy to grind technician medals onto, while simultaneously being good fun to use on the Empire side. In the original game, Endor was so cluttered that it was a pretty miserable level to play on, especially because of the way the ATSTs were majorly busted in the first Battlefront. Pandemic's dev team responded to the player feedback when designing BF2, and it shows in the redesigned levels like this. Number 6. There's something nostalgic about the clatter and scuffing of space boots against the glossy floor of Tantive 4. While this level can be played in either Clone Wars or Galactic Civil War conflicts, I almost never play this level in the Clone Wars era. It just feels wrong to do so, and considering Tantive 4 is my favorite place to use the Empire's Dark Trooper, I find myself using this level as my primary outlet for that class. It is so easy to get 10 kills in one fully charged shot from the Dark Trooper's main gun, and I'd be lying if I said that wasn't one of the major reasons this level is so high for me. Darth Vader and Leia being the heroes for this level is a huge flavor win as well, and conflicts between the two are surprisingly interesting, albeit definitely heavily favoring Vader's victory. Force Choke just absolutely breaks 1v1 hero matchups. Number 5. I love the epic feel of the conflicts on Geonosis. In XL mode, it really feels like the swirling sorties from Attack of the Clones. Geonosis plays into the RP ability of this game in this way. The Republic is my favorite faction to fight as, and this is one of the best levels for the clones to play on because the level is designed to be fun for Jet Troopers and ARC Troopers alike. As for base classes, there's great opportunities to use the Heavy, Sharpshooter, Engineer, and Assault classes to great effect, with each being better for certain CPs versus others. Number 4. Mustafar is one of my favorite locations in BF2. I love the meshing of metal and magma, and there are some cool CPs to compete for here. Two close CPs from the start of the map are separated by a bridge that can be lowered into lava via the destruction of a control panel. In terms of defense, this is a great strategy, but taking control of both of these CPs from the beginning gives the team a pretty stable position from which to advance to other command points. This is the primary reason I almost never eliminate that bridge, as I find success on this level to be easily obtained via the combined power of these posts. From here, Mustafar is full of some great corridors to fight through, and the center of the complex is a good bit of hectic fun on this hellish world. Number 3. The center staging area of Coruscant is a hellhole at times, but that's partly what makes it so good. It also has great places to hide and maneuver around the enemy, making what would normally be a bad thing, like on Bespin, something pretty great on this level. The area around the Jedi Council and the library are some of my favorite areas, as each provides a pretty decent side area to battle over, while also allowing the player and the enemy to seamlessly flow between the primary thoroughfare into these pocketed conflicts. Adding to this, each of the CPs encircling the main middle area have back routes between, creating alternative paths of reaching any area of the map. This makes Coruscant the most varied map to play on in terms of what command points the player feels like fighting for on any given round. Number 2. Hoth is the epitome of open area Battlefront level design. Hoth has enough hills to help cut down on a lot of the cross kills that sometimes happen on levels like Camino, while also creating a level design that is more fluid for players to navigate, allowing them to enter and exit firefights with ease. The level is also really balanced on the Empire or Rebels side. The AT-AT's natural counter is the Snowspeeders, and this dichotomy between the two, one hyper-powered and slow and the other being weak but fast, plays into the strengths of both. The Rebels may not have AT-ATs, but they do have the ability to attack the Empire's CPs in quicker flash fight ways through the utilization of Tauntauns and Snowspeeders. This creates a conquest experience that is hopefully balanced and always enjoyable to experience. Number 1. The Death Star is my favorite level by far. I love all of the major conflict zones. This is the best capture the flag level, and also the best level to acquire most metal types. Words can't express how great the design of the pillars in the tractor beam control area are, because you're able to utilize the jump button to quickly zip around certain areas of this zone, and the Death Star is the only map designed in this way. Jumping is sometimes useful on other levels, but nothing even comes close to this one single area on the Death Star. The Death Star also is host to great locations, like the firing array, detention block, hangar bay, observation deck, officer's meeting room, and garbage chute. When I would play this as a younger kid, I would command troopers to follow me into the garbage chute, and sometimes all of the ones following me would die. It would always make me laugh so much, and honestly, it's a great place to go if you're trying to break out of the detention block to capture some of the other points, making it a flavor win as well. With a hero, the garbage chute is a great way of backdooring the detention block, since the heroes, specifically the Republic and Rebellions, are able to jump through the garbage chute, ambushing any poor Imperial stormtroopers or CIS droids unfortunate enough to be in the detention block at that point in time. Combine all of this with the gloss of the Death Star's interior and the nice sound effects of scuffing space boots, and there's no doubt in my mind that this is the single best level in the entire game. Star Wars Battlefront II has been in my top 100 games of the 2000s ever since I started drafting that list all the way back in 2018. It has actually been in my top 10 games of the 2000s for a long time, although after replaying I think it'll be dropping a few positions. There are just some aspects of it that aren't conducive to replay anymore, considering my shifting gaming tastes and the fact that I am no longer the biggest Star Wars fan, like I was when I played this game as a freshman in high school. As an autistic person, this video game changed my life, since it provided me with an outlet with which to form the strongest friendship I have ever known, one that is still maintained to this very day. Until I get dementia or die, I'll always remember the time John and I played this game and how that one event changed the course of our lives forever. I don't regret an hour I spent playing this game as a kid, and while I do wish Aspyr would have done a better job with this port, I still enjoyed earning the platinum on this replay. I rate platinums on a trophy denomination basis, with bronze meaning a completion process is bad, silver meaning it's not bad but it's also not recommended, gold meaning I recommend it for fans of the game, and platinum meaning I feel the platinum is a must-have for the trophy hunter. In BF2's case, I'm going to say the platinum is in the gold tier, as I do recommend it but only for fans of the original. I really got to go down memory lane with this one, and if you pick this game up, you'll be able to do the same. And that's the video, my guys. Let me know all of your Battlefront 2 memories in the comments section below, and while you're there, please consider liking, sharing, and subscribing. I make Rayl Deal gaming videos like this every Friday. If you have a moment right now, consider checking out some of my other videos on the screen. Regardless of what you choose to do, have an awesome day, gamers.